Hi everyone, and welcome to Assignment 2, Behavior Change Intervention Analysis and Determinants Matrix. Let's walk through Assignment 2 because this is where things start to feel much more real world. This assignment is due on day 7, and it's an important step in your development, not just as someone who understands theory, but as someone who can actually use it to evaluate and improve interventions. Because ultimately, in practice, no one hands you a perfect program and says, just go implement this. You're often left looking at something and thinking, okay, well, why isn't this working the way it should? Here's the big picture of what you will be doing this week. You will be taking a real-world behavior change intervention and asking 3 core questions. Did this actually work? Why or why not? And how could it be improved using theory? And this matters because a lot of interventions check all of the boxes on paper. They provide all the right information, they recommend healthy behaviors, and they may even have some good intentions. But they fail because they don't actually address how people make decisions and change behavior. And this is where theory comes in. In part 1, the case analysis, you will choose one intervention type. That can be a public health campaign, clinical initiative, community-based program, or a digital app-based intervention. And just a gentle nudge, digital interventions are everywhere right now, and they give you a lot of information to work with in terms of analysis. Once you have this all sorted, set the foundation with the program summary. Consider this your baseline. You want to clearly explain what the program is, who it targets, what behavior it's trying to change, and what strategies it uses. But here's the key. I don't want you just to describe it. I want you to set up your analysis. So as you summarize, start noticing things like what assumptions in this program is this program making about people? Does it assume all people lack the knowledge, motivation? What about access? Because those assumptions usually point you toward an underlying theory, whether the designers realized it or not. Next, we can start to think about theory alignment. Here's where you move from describing to thinking like a behavior scientist. You'll identify which theory or theories are at play. Something like the health belief model, where we look at perceptions of risk and benefit. Theory of planned behavior, which considers attitudes, norms, and control. What about social cognitive theory, where self-efficacy, modeling, and environment may all influence behavior? And the all-inclusive trans-theoretical model, where we are trying to gauge a person or group's readiness to change. But don't just stop at naming the theory. I want you to ask, is this intervention actually targeting the key constructs of this theory? For example, if they're using social cognitive theory, where is the self-efficacy support? Where is the modeling or skill building? If they're using health belief model, are they addressing perceived barriers or just throwing risk statistics at people? Because the common issue is that programs will say that they're theory-based, but then really only apply about 20% of that theory in practice. The next piece is where you will engage in the heart of the assignment, critical evaluation. This is where you get to evaluate like a professional, not like a student. I want you to think in layers. Think about what worked, where we ask, did engagement increase? Did behavior actually change? And for whom did it work best? What didn't work? Where we wonder, did people drop out? Did people revert back to their old behaviors over time? Or was there low uptake? And then we'll try to figure out if there were misalignments. This is key. Try to dig in and ask questions like, did the intervention target knowledge when the real issue was access? Did it assume motivation when the barrier was actually structural? Or did it ignore social or cultural influences? And don't forget to consider context. Behavior does not ever happen in isolation. So ask, were cultural beliefs considered? Was the intervention accessible for everyone? Or were there structural barriers like cost, time, and transportation? Because an intervention can be theoretically sound and it will still fail if it doesn't fit people's actual lives. Now that we've talked about theories and misalignment, we can make theory-driven improvements. That way we can fix those issues. Think of this as your chance to apply what you know. Here, you should be proposing specific, evidence-based, and theory-aligned improvements. This is where detail matters. Instead of just saying something like, well, we're going to add education, you could try saying something like tailor education addressing perceived barriers would be added, or skill building sessions to increase self-efficacy. What about peer modeling to support observational learning? Or environmental changes to improve access to your program. Think of theory as your blueprint. You're just building something more effective with it. The next big piece of this assignment is the determinants to strategies matrix. This is where everything becomes very concrete. In this matrix, you're translating a problem into a theory or concept and then into an actual strategy with an expected outcome. I want to see very clear logic. For example, let's say someone has a barrier of low confidence. Use the theory to explain the construct, which could be self-efficacy from the social cognitive theory. Then create a strategy that is basically guided practice with feedback. When put all together, we can see the effect is increased confidence and adherence to whatever behavior you're trying to change. That's a very clean chain. So, if your strategy is education and you stop there, I promise you that is not enough. Because education about what? Delivered how? Targeting what belief? Specificity is what turns this from a checklist into a real intervention design. Now, let's push all of this into 2026 and modernize this a bit. This is where things get especially relevant. Digital tools are essentially behavior change theories in action, but faster and more personalized and sometimes a little relentless. They can provide real-time cues to actions through notifications, use AI-driven tailoring to adjust goals and messaging. They can enhance self-monitoring through constant tracking, and they can create feedback loops that reinforce behavior. So here's what to look for in your analysis related to digital tools. How are researchers applying these tools to theory? Push notifications, cues to action, algorithm-driven content or personalization? How about those app nudges as subtle reinforcement? Or social features that create accountability and provide support? But the important thing to consider is that are these features supporting behavior change, or do they just exist in our lives? Because not all features are effective just because they're digital. With all of these tools, there are definitely trade-offs. Digital interventions can definitely increase engagement, improve tracking, and personalize experiences. But they can also overwhelm users, lead to notification fatigue, create inequities in access, and sometimes turn into that one app that you downloaded with great intentions, but you never opened it again. Don't worry, no judgment. We've all been there before. So ask yourself, is the digital design aligned with behavior change theory? Is it sustainable for the user? Who benefits and who might actually get excluded through this technology? And is the technology actually meaningful, or is it just background noise we ignore on our phone all day? This assignment is about really shifting your thinking from, I understand this theory, to, I can evaluate and improve interventions using a specific theory. And that is a very different approach and a much more valuable skill. All right, guys, that's enough for this one. I'm excited to see how you break down these interventions and, more importantly, how you're going to make them better.